gone through stuff. As humans, we've gone through stuff, and to hear how, like, the different ways that we see that God has worked in aspects of our lives, and to hear the power of God moving in the lives of other people is just incredible, because it affirms the fact that hey, it's not all about me, and it's about this God that is far more at work than I could ever imagine. And so thank you for sharing, Evelise, and thank you for leading us through that. And as we go into this sermon today, this is kind of a standalone sermon. This isn't part of a series, because we've just preached through our vision at North Hill Adventist Fellowship, and our mission and our vision is to see dead lives raised to new life in Jesus Christ. That's the gospel, that we are dead in our sins, and yet God, who is gracious and compassionate and rich in mercy, through the love with which He loved us, while we were still dead in our trespasses, has raised us to new life in Jesus Christ. And that's in Ephesians chapter 2. That's what we want to see. We want to see us able to live the fullness of life, and see the people in our community be able to live the fullness of life. But then, okay, well, how do we contribute to that? And we want to be relevant. We want to be a meaningful, relevant. What's the word I'm trying to look for? We're trying to be relevant to our community, relevant to the people in our church. We hope to be disciple making, and last, we hope to be a multiplying church. We talked through that, and the crazy part about vision and the awesome part about mission is that it says, "Hey, let's go do something. Let's get on the job. Let's start going." And I'm about to just pull us to a screeching halt and say, "Let's just hold up." Because I was, a while back, I got a standing desk. Okay, I got a standing desk, which is a desk that you stand at. And in case that was different, it's the reason I got it wasn't because I don't like sitting. It was just because I like to have the option of doing both, right? And it's kind of weird to stand at your desk trying to work like this, right? So I got a standing desk. Well, while I was trying to look for the standing desk, I was looking at a bunch of different articles and stuff and trying to find the right one. Came across these articles that were talking about how bad sitting is, right? I don't know if you've seen any of these, okay? There's articles about how bad sitting is, right? There was an article where this guy, he says, every hour that you spend sitting and watching TV takes 20 minutes off your life. I was like, whoa, the Super Bowl is going to take an hour off my life. I mean, I'm still going to watch it because the Patriots in the Super Bowl. I see you back there, Donovan. I'm a Patriots fan, sorry. Yeah, I have to say this every time. In my defense, before Tom Brady was the quarterback, I was still a fan. So, I just want to say that. But an hour off my life, sitting could take an hour off my life. That's probably a little excessive, but that's where this guy came to. Another guy says, another article said it causes your gluteus maximus, this back here, to weaken, which then affects your posture, right? Another person was like, well, if you sit too long, it prevents blood from getting to your brain, and because it prevents blood from getting to your brain, that's why you get foggy and all that stuff, and it's hard to think. Another person, this was where, you know how Google, if you Google something and you see it, if you don't see it on the first page, it's not worth going to the second page, right? Have you ever realized that? The first 10 options are really the only ones you ever check. I went to page 17, the dark recesses of Google, and even though there's thousands, 17 is the dark recesses of it. I went to page 17, and that's where you start to get into articles like this, where it's sitting down with your back at a 90-degree angle is not the way you should sit. You should not sit up straight. What are you talking about? Actually, the way you should sit is at a 135-degree angle, right? So you're sitting down, your body's bent back like this, and you work like this. I was like, where am I? Who is coming up with this? This is nonsense at this point, right? But I saw articles all sorts of stuff. But I personally, I like to sit. I don't know about you. All of you are sitting right now, and the joke I could make is I'm going to preach for an hour, which means that 20 minutes of your life is gone. I'm taking 20 minutes of your life right now. No, but I personally like sitting. Sitting is relaxing. Sitting is, it's comfortable. It's not harmful to my feet. All of these articles that are you should stand more, I'm like, my feet hurt. I don't want to do that. Sitting is just, you don't have to break a sweat. It's just better, right? It's just better. But then you read articles that literally are titled, "Sitting is the new smoking." And you're like, what? Where's this come? And the context is that a sedentary lifestyle for a long period of time can increase your risk for heart disease and all of these different things. But I want to argue today that sitting still is actually the first step to a better life. And I say that, and I say that jokingly, because I don't mean that in a physical sense. I mean that in a spiritual sense. But that's the reality that I see, at least in Scripture. We live in this world where things change constantly. Like, we live in a world where production is a premium, and what you do and how much things need to happen. And like, we want stuff to happen, we want it to happen now, and we're on the go, and we're on the go, and we're on the go. But then the first thing that, at least that I see scripturally, is that it tells us to just sit still, stop, don't do anything, just stop. And it seems weird, but then if we go back to the story that Evilise read for us in Luke chapter 10, and we're going to be there for most of the day, so if you want to go to Luke chapter 10, that's where we'll be. Luke chapter 10, verse 38, and I'll be reading out of a different translation, but it says Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village. And just for some context, Jesus he's just told the story of the Good Samaritan. He's just sent out a bunch of disciples to go do all this stuff. And so at this point, he's coming into this village. Jesus entered a village. And a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him and said, "Lord, do you not even care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her and said, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary, and Mary has chosen the good portion," or the better part is probably the better translation, the better part, which will not be taken away from her. And what's funny is there's these two reactions to Jesus showing up in their lives, in these ladies' lives. And the first is, let me make him a 5-course dinner, and the other is, ain't nobody got time to do any of that, right? It's I want to make a meal, I want to do this, and then the other reaction is, let me just sit still and just sit here with him and do nothing, right? And those are two real opposite reactions if you think about it. I still remember that my parents would have people over for lunch after church all the time. And when they get there, my mom would be in the kitchen, right? And my dad would be on the couch. And so my dad would be entertaining the people that were coming. My mom would be in the kitchen. So I get the separation here, but they're two opposite reactions, right? They're doing two completely different things. But then Jesus praises the one that we probably wouldn't necessarily praise, because we have one lady who's being super productive and trying to do a bunch of stuff, and we have this other lady who's not doing much, and Jesus praises the one who's not doing much, which is weird to us. If you came in and you saw your spouse, your husband, your roommate, friend, brother, whoever, you just said they had done nothing the entire day, you would have been like, there's something wrong with this. But Jesus praises someone doing nothing, which is weird. But I think that often we get so caught up in doing. We get so caught up in doing things that we forget about Jesus. And then when we forget about him, we end up doing all these things, and we end up frustrated, and we end up tired, and we end up uninspired and defeated and burnt out and all of these different things. But what I want to look through in the story is this concept of what does it mean to sit still, and why is Jesus calling us to that? And the way I want to do that is I want to focus on Martha first. And I think there's a few things in here that I see that Martha is trying to do. Martha has these big desires in her heart. And the first thing, Luke 10, verse 40, says, "But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him and said, 'Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve all alone? Tell her to help me.'" But in that first part, Martha was distracted with much serving. She was distracted with much serving. Martha gets a pretty bad rap. I don't know if you've been Christian for a while and you've heard sermons, you've probably heard this story before and heard about how Martha doesn't get it, which she doesn't, but she doesn't get it. And she gets a pretty bad rap, especially up against her sister, who gets praised constantly, right? Martha just ends up being the complainer. Martha ends up being the one who doesn't get it. But Martha, I think, has really good intentions. If you think about it, she has really good intentions. And I think a lot of us can relate to her. Martha has a huge desire to make everything perfect, right? I don't know if you've ever seen this, that Martha, I think, has this huge desire to make everything perfect. She sees Jesus coming to town. She's invited him into her home. And now she wants to make this meal. She wants to clean the house. She wants to make everything nice. She wants to make sure everything is perfect for Jesus who's now here. But as crazy as it sounds, I don't think Jesus really cared so much about getting a 5-course meal. I don't think Jesus so much cared about whether or not there was some dirt on the floor. I don't think Jesus cared about the 3 weeks of unfolded laundry that's still on the couch. Like I don't think that he cares so much about that. But Martha did, right? But Martha did. And she wanted it to be perfect. And this is where I think the desire for perfection becomes a big problem in our lives. Because what the desire for perfection tells me is that if I just did everything right, or if everything was right, if everything was in its place, if everything was as it should be, then I could relax. Or then I would get what I need. Or like for instance, if everything was just right in my life, then my dad or my mom, who never gave me any affirmation, or never gave me any sort of praise in my life, they would finally do it. If everything was just right. If everything was just right, then maybe people wouldn't judge me as much, or maybe I would feel better about myself. If everything was just right, maybe Jesus would be happy with me. Like maybe if my life wasn't such a mess, Jesus would be happy with me. And this idea causes in our life this mentality that our effort, if we just put in more effort, if we just had enough effort into it, then it would make us worthy of whatever it is that we're looking for in life, whether that's approval, or whether that's love, or whether that's praise, or feeling worthy. If I just put in enough effort, then I would be worthy of it. But the problem with perfectionism is that it burns us out, because looking for perfectionism burns us out, because when I'm looking for perfection, it causes me to set these goals in my life that I can never really attain. I remember I was hiking in Colorado. My mom lived in Colorado for a couple years, and there was this trail called the Incline Trail. So she lived about an hour south of Colorado Springs. And Colorado Springs is right up against the Rockies. It's beautiful up there. My mom lived in like the desert of Colorado. Like I didn't even know this place existed. So I would drive like an hour. Every time I go to visit her, I'd go an hour north to Colorado Springs to go hiking. And there was this place called Manitou Springs, and there was this trail out of this small little town called the Incline Trail. And what it was about a little over 3,000 feet of elevation gain in 3 miles, right? Except it was straight up the side of a mountain. Like it's not switchbacks. It's just like, hey, let's just go straight up it. They just cut a path in the forest because it was kind of created specifically to be this kind of weird trail. It was cut straight directly into the forest, and what it was a bunch of railroad ties turned into stairs, right? So you had railroad tie after, and at first, you're kind of going at this kind of angle, right? And the stairs are relatively easy, and then I'm not joking. It's like you get up to about this, and the stairs get farther apart. And I thought I was in pretty good shape. I was feeling pretty good about myself, right? And then, about halfway up, I'm just like, this is the worst decision I've ever made in my life, okay? Because your legs are burning. I'm just like praying to Jesus. Let me take the next step. Let me take the next step. I'm literally like, that's how I'm getting through this thing. And so I'm going up it, and I can see the top. And the top is getting closer and closer and closer, and I'm just dying here. Because, by the way, it's also 6,000 foot elevation, just in general there. So like I was just dying. So I'm getting closer and closer, and as you get closer and closer to something, you see this goal, and okay, I could put in more effort right now. It feels like you've lost all of your energy, but once you get close, you can put in more effort because you see the end, right? And so I start doing that, and I finally get closer and closer and closer, and then I see it, and I realize that it's a false summit. This darn thing is a false summit. Okay, so when I get close to this, because of the angle, I see the top, but then you get to the top and it kind of flattens out for a while, and then it goes back up. The devil made this trail. It's just ridiculous. And so, and the hardest part about it is that when you get to this point where you're looking up and you see all this and you're so excited about getting to this point, and you just put that last burst of energy in because you could finally get to here, and then I'll be done and I can finally rest. We do the same thing with our lives where we set these goals for ourselves and we're like, if I could just get to this point, then everything would be good. But then we realize when we get there, it's a false summit, because even though I was better and I did all of the things that would have made my dad proud of me, or at least I thought, he still has a problem with me. And even though I did everything that my boss should have liked, they still have a problem with what I did. And you get to these points and you still realize, like, man, if I could just get to this point, I would be better. God would love me. And then you get there and you realize your life is still super messed up. And it's these false summits after false summit. And the problem is when you keep doing this in your life, you get stuck and you just lose motivation and you lose the desire to be better because you realize like it never works. Once I get there, I'm still stuck, and I'm still me, and I'm still broken, and people still aren't satisfied with me. And every failure leaves us more worn out. And every failure makes us more irritable, and more depressed, and more frustrated, more tired, more hopeless because we can't make it. When Jesus, on the other hand, is like, hey, listen, I'm cool with you the way you are. I'm cool with it if your house is a mess. I'm cool with you with all of your mistakes. Like, I want you that way. Right? I want you the way that you are. I have never desired for you to be different than you are so that I could accept you. I just want you this way. You don't have to do a single thing for me right now because I want you to be here. Stop trying to be perfect by yourself. Stop trying to be perfect so you can get to me, because in me is the only way you can be perfect. Stop trying to be perfect so you can get to me, because through me and in me is the only way you can be perfect. Can I just tell you the Hebrew concept of perfection? Because we live in this weird thing where we have this kind of Greek way of thinking of perfection. Greek concept was there was this world and the other world, right? This world and the spiritual world, and the spiritual world is like perfect and amazing and awesome, and that's where you want to be. And you've got to disavow yourself of the physical world so you can get to the spiritual world. And once you get there, everything's perfect, right? And so we have this idea that there's this place we have to get to. And so it's kind of like this trail. If I could get to the summit, then everything would be great. Guess what the Hebrew concept of perfection is? The Hebrew concept of perfection is not getting to the summit. It's walking with Jesus on the trail. Like, that's the difference. When I'm walking with Jesus, in Jesus I am perfect, and it doesn't matter if I get to the summit, because it's not even so much that there is a summit, it's that I'm with Jesus. Like, that's the summit. I'm with Jesus. And so that's why Jesus, he's here, and he's just like, Martha, listen, you're troubled, and you have anxiety about all this stuff, because you want it all to be perfect and laid out, and every way that it should be. He's like, I just want you the way that you are, because through me is how you find what you're looking for. Martha wanted everything to be perfect, but also Martha felt super overworked. I remember, let me just read this right here. Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. Right? I remember I was 8 years old. I think I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. I was 8 years old, and I had to pick up the dog leftovers in the backyard of our house. And my mom at the time was running some sort of daycare kind of thing. And I'm in the backyard. My mom makes me go outside to pick up this stuff. And it was the worst job ever. I still hate it. I mean, I won't complain about it, even though I am right now. I won't complain about it while I'm doing it, because it's just necessary. I hated it at 8 years old. It smells bad. It's awful. It's hot. I don't want it, right? So I'm outside at 8 years old, and when I go outside to pick this stuff up, the worst thing ever in the world, guess what the other kids, like the 4-year-olds, I'm like 8, guess what the 4-year-olds get to do? They get to have snack time. I don't know what my mom was trying to do to me. I don't know what spirit she was trying to break in me, but it broke me. Because I came inside, I'm like crying, I'm in tears because I'm so mad. Because the whole time I'm out there, I'm so mad. I'm looking inside, I can see them at the dining table just like staring at me through the window, just like, we get to eat all of these. They weren't doing this, but this is what I thought. We get to eat all these snacks and you're stuck out there. That's where I'm at, just stewing in my frustration. I come inside and I'm mad, I'm like crying, like, why don't they have to do anything? Like, that was my question. Why don't they have to do anything? These 4-year-olds who my mom is watching, why don't they have to do the chores? That's my question. I don't know about you, but like I can imagine that most of us have had periods of time in our life where we look at, where we feel like we're alone in what we're doing. We feel like people aren't holding up their weight. You feel like you're the only one in a friend relationship that's actually putting in the effort to keep the relationship going, right? Like you're the only one at work or at school trying to keep the project going. We have these moments, and the reason that we feel so frustrated and hurt and broken in these moments is because we feel isolated, and we feel like it's unfair, and we feel like we're being taken advantage of. We feel all of these different things, and that's what I think Martha is experiencing, right? She's there and she's so frustrated because here she is trying to do this incredible thing, and she's trying to do all this stuff, and Martha and her sister Mary is literally doing zero, like nothing, okay? And she has this frustration. She goes and says, hey, Jesus, don't you care that I've literally been doing everything? Just tell her to help me. Why won't you tell her to help me? And I think there's so many times in our life that we do this. Because if you notice, Martha comes in, and who does she get mad at? Not her sister who's not helping her, but at Jesus who's talking to her. And I think so often in our lives, we come into these situations. Let me say it this way. God, I've been jobless for months, and I've been trying the whole time, and I've been putting in the effort, I've been doing all this stuff. Like, why aren't you helping people to give me a job? Like, why won't you do it? And all of a sudden I'm mad at God. And then I've been asking you to fix this relationship, and I've read book after book after book after book, and I've tried thing after thing after thing after thing. I've been suffering through this for so long. Why won't you fix this? And all of a sudden we start getting mad at God, and we feel overworked, and we feel left out to dry, and we feel like we're not getting our due because we've put in the effort, now God's doing nothing. But whenever we feel this way, whenever we criticize the lack of effort in others, whenever we pity ourselves because of how overworked we are and how tired we are, we have to then take a moment to reflect on our own lives. Because maybe in all of our busyness and maybe in all of our plans, we've forgotten about Jesus. And I know some of you are like, no. I haven't forgotten about Jesus. I haven't been ignoring Jesus. Like, I have not been ignoring Jesus. I have not. I have been telling him over and over what's going on, and I've been telling him this for years, for days, for months, whatever it is. I've been telling him I have not been ignoring Jesus. But what's crazy about this is that in the story, the problem isn't that Martha isn't talking to Jesus and telling him what she needs. That's not the problem here, right? Because she's doing it. Listen, I'm overworked. Tell my sister to help me, right? That's what she senses. That's what she thinks is the problem. But that's not the problem. The problem is that Martha has decided what Jesus needs. She's decided he needs a meal. She's decided that he needs all this stuff to be perfect, right? She's decided this. She's decided what Jesus needs, and then she's taken the burden of meeting those needs onto herself, right? And then she's coming in and gotten mad at Jesus for not helping her with what she has decided that he needs. I don't know if I need to go over that again. But literally, like, she's decided what Jesus needs. So then she takes the burden on herself and starts trying to meet all of the needs that she thinks he has. And then she gets mad at him for not helping her with the needs that she thinks that he has. And we do the same thing, like, God, I made these plans, right? This is the plans that should come true, right? And now I'm going to take the burden of this on myself to make these plans come to pass. And now I'm mad at you for not helping me with the plans that I made for you. And we do that, right? And now Martha, guess who she's mad at? She's not mad at Mary. She's not mad at the situation. She's mad at Jesus. I think sometimes we get so worked up, like Martha. Martha's motivation, let me say this, Martha's motivation was to do things for Jesus. And because of that, she forgot to be with Jesus. She was so focused on doing things for Jesus that she forgot to be with Jesus. And when she forgot to be with Jesus, she ended up feeling like she was like everything was her responsibility. She ended up feeling like Jesus wasn't helping. She ended up feeling lonely and unappreciated. But the crazy part is when you stop doing things for Jesus and you start taking time to be with Jesus, right? When you start taking time to just like spend part of your day with him, when you start taking time to pray, when you start taking time to give your heart over to listen, to read or to listen to the word, to do whatever it is, to take time to spend with Jesus, when you start spending time with him, when you start abiding, living in Jesus and allowing him to live in yourself by surrendering your life over to him and giving him all of this stuff in your life continuously, guess what? You all of a sudden realize, you start to realize that the stuff that you felt overburdened about, you don't feel the same way about, right? You start realizing that you're not doing things for that ungrateful spouse who will never appreciate you, right? You're doing things through Jesus. You're loving them through, like he's loving them through you, right? All of a sudden, it's not so much about, man, they're never going to appreciate me. It's more about the fact that, hey, God is just doing this through me. You start to realize that, wow, I'm not alone in what I'm doing. You notice that sometimes, like Martha, we feel so alone in what we do because we've decided to do it ourselves. Let me say that one more time. We feel alone in what we do because we've decided to do it ourselves. And Jesus is like, I never wanted that for you, and so I want you to come be with me. so that we can go out and we can do things maybe together instead of you just doing it by yourself? I mean, here's the thing. I think Jesus wants to be our close companion. I think he wants to be our strength. He wants to be our peace. He wants to be our joy. But he can't do that as long as we are dedicated to doing it ourselves. He can't. He can't do it as long as we are dedicated to making our own plans and doing things the way we like to do them. Because then we don't want him. We're like, cool, I'd like you to be my strength, but I'd also like to just use my own. I like to have peace, but I'd also like to just try and figure out maybe if I can manufacture it for myself. And Jesus is like, no, I want you to come be with me. Because when you're with me, all of a sudden you start to realize that everything else flows out of that. The last thing, actually let me say this one more time. When I have spent time being with Jesus, when I've just spent time actually engaging in prayer and in being with him and listening and giving my heart over to him, I have never walked away from those moments feeling overworked. I've never walked away from those moments feeling like I was alone. I've never walked away from those moments feeling like, man, I just got to put the whole world on my shoulders. I've never walked away from those. Now, not every moment with Jesus is going to be some transcendent experience. But I can tell you that those moments where I've noticed that I'm actually giving my heart over to Jesus, I've never walked away from those moments feeling burdened. I come away from those moments feeling free. And in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, Jesus even promises this. He says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So Martha felt overworked, but Jesus the whole time was, "I want to give you rest." Then we come to this last thing that I see in Martha, and Martha really wanted to be productive. We live in a culture of production. Culture of production. We used to be okay with being able to send an email, we used to be really stoked about this, being able to send an email across the world, even though it took us 87 minutes to connect to the dial-up, right? We used to be cool with that, but then we developed all this other stuff, faster internet, faster computers, all this stuff, so that we could do more work. And now we live in a culture of production. Literally everything is built around that. And so what the output of my life is what people look at. Well, that's okay. That's fine. I like that we work more and stuff. But being a human being means that I get really tired when everything is focused on output. We see this. Martha says, Martha was distracted. She went up and said to him, "Lord, do you not care that my sister left me to serve alone?" But then this is what Jesus' answer is to her. "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken away from her." Martha is dead set on making sure that she's doing enough. I don't know about you, but I think a lot of the times in my life, the question in my heart is, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? And we constantly have these questions. And Martha is going above and beyond to make sure that she's being a good host. But when she comes into the room and she's annoyed because she's not being helped, Jesus then goes, "Hey, cool, your lazy sister is doing the thing that I prefer," right? Which has got to be super frustrating, right? If you think about that, if you came home and your brother or your sister was literally doing nothing and you went to do the dishes and you come in and you're like, "I've been doing the dishes, make my brother do more," and your mom's like, "No, he's doing what I prefer." You're like, that's not cool. That's really not cool, right? But that's what Jesus says. But I think the problem is that Martha has started to find her identity in her output. She started to find her identity in the things that she does and the things that she produces. I think we do this all the time. I think that a lot of the time we love how liked we are at work when we do well. We like how many likes we get on a social media post because it's something that tells us that people like us because of something that we created or did. But what's crazy about it is that we don't even have to like what we do in order to find our identity in it. Right? You can make dinner for your family every single day of the week for the rest of your life, and you can hate it at every moment of it. But it's the way that you show your family that you love and care for them. And so you do it, and your identity starts to get wrapped up in the fact that you do that. You may not even like your job, but then you lose your job, and you're like, wow, do I have any purpose? Do I have any meaning in this life? Where did it all go? We don't even have to like what we're doing to find our identity in it. That's what's so crazy about it. And when we feel like the output of our lives has some bearing on our worth, it starts to affect our joy and it starts to steal it. And Martha comes out super mad because she feels so alone, and she feels like she's the only one who's producing something. Like, look what I'm doing. I'm doing something here, and no one's helping me. And Martha seemed to enjoy being productive, which is fine. But the problem was that production or her output had become her identity. And it becomes this horrible cycle, right? I know that like one time, I remember I climbed the rock wall at camp, the camp where I worked. And the first time I did it, I broke a record of how fast you could climb it, right? Well, guess what? Every single time I get on that wall, now it's the pressure of matching or bettering it, right? And the same thing happens in our lives where we have these moments where I made a good meal. Now every meal has to match up to that, or it's a failure, right? I hit my quota one day, and then my boss comes in and goes, hey, what if you did more the next day? What if you do more tomorrow, right? Well, we have these things where it's always about more and more output, and it becomes a never-ending cycle because it just feels like I can never do enough. And then we always have that question in the back of our minds, am I doing enough? And the problem is so I have this phone. The phone's back there. Need to be prepared. I have this phone, right? And when you get up in the morning, I have it plugged in, right? So it has 100% battery, and I just feel like I can do anything in the world, right? You're just like, this is awesome. I can literally waste as much battery as I want to because I'm going to have plenty to last. But the problem is like later in the middle of the day when my phone starts to go down, I've been using it and it gets down to 20 and 15, 10, 5% battery, all of a sudden, anxiety starts to set in. This is really sad. I don't know if this is just like me or if this is other people, but anxiety starts to set in because I'm like, well, what happens if someone calls and it's important and it dies halfway through and I have no way of charging my phone, and then they think that I just ignored them or hung up on them, and then what happens, and then all of a sudden you get into like this crazy spiral of what, you start to have this anxiety. Well, what happens if I get an emergency and I can't use my phone, and what happens because all of a sudden my phone the battery is dying. But guess what? The problem is not that the phone has a limited battery. It's literally created that way. The problem is that I don't have a way to charge it. And the problem for us is the reality is that as long as we're living out of our own power with nothing backfilling that or filling us up as a result, we will always come to the end where we're burnt out. And Martha comes out because she's burnt out because she's been doing it and it's all her. And she doesn't have anything filling her inside. And she doesn't have the Spirit of God living in her and giving her joy for what she's doing because she's taken it all on herself. And the same thing happens for us, that if our worth depends on what we produce, we'll always be wondering if it's enough, and it will always burn us out. But when we take the time to sit at the feet of Jesus, and when we take time to listen, hear, and be filled by Him, we always will have the confidence that whatever we're doing, whatever He's leading us to do, is enough. If our worth is in our production, we'll always wonder if we're doing enough. But if we sit at the feet of Jesus and we're filled by Him, we will have the confidence that whatever He leads us to do is enough. And as I close, I want to look at Mary. Because Mary is kind of the one, she doesn't even say a word in this story. That's what's crazy about this. She's just there, right? She's just chilling, being really stoked about doing the right thing, I guess. I don't know. She just doesn't say a word. But she's sitting at the feet of Jesus. And I don't know what Jesus was saying to Mary. I don't know what He says to you, what He's saying to you right now. I don't know what he says to you when you pray, when you spend time with Him. I don't know what Jesus says to you, but here's what I know. When I'm at the feet of Jesus and when my spirit is willing to listen, when my heart is open, I feel full and I feel empowered and I feel like, hey, maybe this life has hope. Maybe this life has something to offer. Maybe this life, maybe I can do more with my life. Maybe not more in amount, but more in terms of being meaningful in this life. She's sitting at the feet of Jesus, and I know we've talked about our mission and our vision. We've talked about what we want to be as a church, that we want to be a relevant disciple-making and multiplying church, and that means a lot. We've started small groups. Hopefully at some point we're going to start classes and stuff that will help us increase our knowledge and stuff on how to mentor, how to know more about the gospel and all this stuff. Hopefully over time we're going to start serving in our community. All of this. Like that's what we hope for. We're a church. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what we're called to do. But the problem is if we do it without Jesus, and if we step into this as people who are just doing things out of our own power, we'll always come to the end of our battery. We'll always come to the end of this point where we feel burnt out and frustrated. We're always going to come to the point where we feel like we've done so much and just nobody has appreciated us. We'll always come to these moments where it's difficult and it's tiring and it's old and it doesn't seem like we're bearing much fruit if we do it on our own. But the reality is that Mary was at the feet of Jesus, and there's two other places in the Bible that we see Mary. This specific Mary. It's in this story, but then there's two other specific places. And the next story we see her in is in the book of John, chapter 11. And Mary has a brother named Lazarus, and he's died. And her sister Martha goes out to Jesus and says, man, this really sucks. But then Mary hears that Jesus is there, and she goes out to Jesus, and guess where she ends up? She falls at his feet, which is pretty crazy because where was she before? She was at his feet. We see her in another story at John 12, the next chapter, where there's a banquet at their house. Martha's doing her Martha thing in the kitchen. She seems like she's a little bit better spirits this time around. And Mary comes in with some of the most expensive perfume that money could buy and pours it on the feet of Jesus, like she's at his feet again. I don't know what Mary liked about Jesus' feet, but she really loved his feet. I mean, most of us in here were like, feet are gross, but she liked his feet. And I think that the reason I find this so powerful is because Mary knew that the feet of Jesus was the best place to be. Whether it was just learning, listening, hearing from him in her day-to-day life, or whether it was in the greatest sorrows, the greatest tragedies, the greatest trials that she's ever been through, or whether it was just her being so thankful for what God has been doing in her life that she just couldn't help but pour out her love to him, right? But she was at his feet. And what that means practically for us is that we have to be in a position of humility, a position of being willing to be taught by Jesus. Being at the feet of Jesus, if you're at someone's feet, like you're in a position of submission at that point. You're in a position of saying, you have the authority to tell me what to do. You have the authority to teach me. You have the authority to do something in my life that I can't do. You have that. And when we're at the feet of Jesus like that, supernatural things happen. I wish I could just lay out to you like, yeah, Jesus does this, and then this, and then this, and then this is how I feel, and then I do this. You can't lay it out. There's the fact that when I'm at the feet of Jesus in my day-to-day life consistently, I notice a change in me. And I notice that my heart is different. And I notice that there's something different happening in the world around me. I notice that I have more energy to do things that He would have me do, as opposed to me just trying to make them happen out of my own willpower. But that's why being at the feet of Jesus is so important. And this is where I want to call us as a church. As a church, we have to be people of prayer. We have to be people who are willing to take time, spending time, whether it's reading or listening or however you connect to the Word, but taking time to really contemplate and ask questions about what it means to you, to me. We have to be people who are willing to just take time in silence and let God speak to us. We have to be people who are willing to be at the feet of Jesus, because that's the only way that we come out of it feeling peace. It's the only way that we come out of it feeling empowered. So, for all of us Marthas out there, most of us in this room, there's very few of us who aren't. For all of us Marthas out there who have plans and have places that we need to go, places that we have desired, places that we've told Jesus, this is just happening and you're supposed to help me with it, whatever it is. What I want to challenge you to is to drop it, to leave it. Because sometimes you got to leave the mess behind. Sometimes you got to leave the laundry on the couch for another couple hours. Sometimes you got to leave your child well-fed and taken care of, but leave them in a room with a bunch of toys and just go get at the feet of Jesus. Because that's the only place you're going to find true love, acceptance, and all the things that you're looking for. It's the only way that we as a church are going to move forward in a healthy way. I don't know what it looks like in your life, but I'm challenging you to it. I want to pray, and as I pray, I'm going to do the same thing that Evilise challenged us to do one more time. Where I'm going to give us a space of silence where we can just say, okay, God, I don't know how. Maybe I haven't been doing it for a while. Maybe it hasn't been a reality in my life, but I want to. I want to be at your feet. I want to live with you. I want you to live in me. If you're someone who it's a consistent thing in your life where you're able to spend time with Jesus on a consistent basis, then ask God to continue to show things to you and to continue to build you into someone who can encourage others. I don't know what it is, but I want to pray and give us that space to just rededicate our lives to being at the feet of Jesus first, to sitting still before we start moving. And then I'll pray to close. So, Lord, I thank you so much that you are a good and faithful God to us. That we get so focused in on the things that we do, on the things that we want to produce, on the direction of our lives. We get so focused on how overworked and how overburdened we are. And we get so focused on making everything perfect. And we get so focused in on these things and we forget you. We forget that instead of doing things for you, we're supposed to do things with you. And we're supposed to be on the path with you, Lord. And so I want to repent of that and just say, God, I'm sorry that I have done that. I'm so sorry that I have been that type of person that has just gone places without you. But God, I want to take the time to now say, God, I want that to change. And so I want to give us the space here in the next 30 seconds to a minute to take that space to repent, but also to ask God to help us and give us the strength. So why don't we do that? God, we're so thankful that you are so good to teach us, to empower us, to help us to learn. But God, I just ask that you would transform our hearts. Help us to become people who desire to be with you and to be at your feet. And every single day, and every single moment, in the moments of sorrow, and the moments of thankfulness, and in the everyday stuff of life, help us to be people who desire to be at your feet. In your name.
Thank you, Jesse. I love the metaphor of plugging my phone in. I think I need to be thinking about that more.
shall be no longer mine. Take my heart, it is thine own. It shall be thy royal throne. It shall be thy royal throne. Take my love, my Lord, I pour at thy feet is treasure store. Take myself and I will be ever only all for thee, ever only all for thee.
Let's pray. God, I just want to thank you so much again for who you are. You have called us into something great. And the problem is, God, that we get so far ahead of you. You want us to do incredible things in this world, and you want to work through us in incredible ways. And so we want to be part of that, God, but we want to first be with you so that we know what to do. So God, I just ask that as we leave this place, we would be inspired to sit at your feet more often, that we would come to desire to be in that position of humility, of being willing to receive from you rather than to just give a bunch of stuff to you. And so God, I just ask that you would continue to put that on our hearts and continue to guide us and bless us as we move forward in this coming year, as we move forward in our lives, and as we move forward in the different aspects that we deal with. So thank you, Lord. We thank you for what you've done at this church, and we thank you for what you're going to do. In your name, amen. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week. And we have, if you've given to the church, we have some tax stuff at the back that Paul is holding up that you can pick up. So thank you so much, church, and we will see you next Sabbath.